particular brand has making quite noise in PropTech industry in India. Yes, we are talking about Square Yards. Square Yards is the India's largest PropTech brokerage and mortgage marketplace. Square Yards has achieved a significant scale in just 6 years and is one of the few Indian startups which have successfully expanded globally. So today we have Tanuj Shori with us, who is the CEO of Square Yards. Thank you, Tanuj, for joining us today for the PropTech Story series.
Thanks, Kritika. Thanks for having me, rather.
So, Tanuj, I'm very keen to know that what was the need gap that you noticed in the Indian real estate market that gave birth to Square Yards?
Uh, One of the most difficult questions for me to answer, because most of the time, most people would anticipate answers like there was a significant gap as a consumer they saw and they wanted to start whichever startup they started. I think our story was a bit different. We most of us come from very strong corporate backgrounds. I was a banker in Hong Kong. I think our attraction towards the space was more to do with Maslow's theory of hierarchy, where we pretty much had ticked most of the boxes we could in our corporate ladder, and there was something exciting we were looking for. It could have very well been the next corporate assignment for all we cared, but at the same time, a lot of our personal wealth was across real estate assets as well as the startup ecosystem. So we were fairly glued into the startup industry, meeting entrepreneurs on a daily basis, putting out our check boxes on how and when to invest in various entrepreneurs. I think one thing which was very critical along this equation was people who we are investing in have to be really passionate about what they are trying to do. They should not be just building that just for the valuation or just because there is another answer to the boredom in their lives and they want to start on their notes. So in that entire evolution, I'll say, or in that time frame, we were very closely looking at how the PropTech industry had emerged in US and China, two largest PropTech markets in the world. Very similar traits, very fragmented industries a couple of decades back, had organized significantly very well over the last 20 years. Look back at India, realize that the level of fragmentation was ludicrous, like I'll say. And even that would be an understatement. The largest developer is a 1% market share, doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. Largest distributor was less than 0.2% market share. So these were the opportunities which were cringing for someone to come in and build. Obviously, for the longest period of time, we thought someone will build. One fine day, we got up on the right side of the bed. We gave it a go. We told ourselves, yes, there are challenges, but the challenges bring opportunities. Let's see how it goes over the next 6 months. 6 months turned into 6 years, and hopefully will turn into 60 years.
So every entrepreneur faces certain challenges, and especially when it comes to Indian real estate market, it's still not that mature, as you said, in comparison to international market. So in beginning, what were the kind of challenges you faced and how you overcome those?
So I'll Kritika, segregate them into two key parts, and I'm sure most of the other startup founders could potentially agree with me. One is the sector level challenges. Obviously, the sector is very fragmented, unregulated. Data is not transparent. We were not exactly dealing with highly professional counterparties here. So that presented itself with its own unique set of challenges, which I think the answer to that would be, were we smarter after the fact? Yes. Did we make mistakes? Yes, we made horrible mistakes actually. But we told ourselves that we will not repeat the same mistakes. So we learned to grapple and evolve amongst those challenges. But I think the more important were the second set of challenges, which probably every entrepreneur faces in their journey, which are execution challenges. I think one thing which probably has become very strongly positioned in our minds after these 6 years is ideas are overrated and execution matters. I think 6 years back, probably we were in the same camp who would be looking for or who would be appreciating and applauding $1 billion idea or a multi-million-dollar idea. Now we don't do the same. For us, ideas are very small speck of this entire equation. The most important thing is how would you get your hands dirty on the ground? How would you execute day in and day out? You will face every second day, and there could be a firefighting, and how you respond to those firefighting is effectively what builds a startup.
Okay. So in 6 years of your journey, you're the first startup who immediately not expanded in India, but also expanded in international market. So what was the vision behind these expansion, and where do you visualize Square Yards to be in next 4 years?
A lot of our growth has been accidental. When I say accidental, what I'm trying to answer here is, see, there is a broad strategy in play. Like, we want to capture 20% market share in Indian real estate. We wake up every single day with a vision towards that. But do we accurately, meticulously plan where we're gonna be next 12 months, where we're gonna be next 24 months? I think a lot of that is accidental based, opportunistic, where we believe we have the potential to expand faster vis-a-vis any other peers or competitors. I think international expansion was one such case for us. I was living outside India, so that helped. Gulf was a very, very important market for the NRI segment for us, and we have almost pseudo monopoly in this market. We control, in the last 4 months, market share has been 80%, but pre-COVID days also we control almost 2 in 10 transactions flowing from Gulf into India. While we were building that, we realized that the local primary markets in Dubai, for example, is not very different from a Mumbai or a Delhi. It has its own unique set of challenges, but there is a developer. The primary market is very, very large, much larger than secondary market. There is a developer. Developer does not own distribution. The distribution is very, very fragmented. The consumers, again, can be bracketed into either end users or investors. It's very similar to the value chain we run in any other Indian city. Again, we replicated the do's and the don'ts of what we did in India to Dubai, and we had a success. We replicated the same thing in Australia and Canada, and these markets grew very, very well for us. So over the last 12 to 18 months, international markets has been one of the fastest growing segments, one of the most profitable segments.
So in such scenario, whom do you consider your competitor, especially when it comes to Indian real estate market? And where I ask for competitors in terms of not just what you are performing in terms of brokerage and mortgage, but as also a PropTech company, whom do you consider your competitor here?
So I don't think we are competing with any single player today. Probably 3 years back, the answer would have been we are competing with a couple of relatively offline brokerages, etc. But over the last 24 months, we have evolved into an ecosystem play. When I say an ecosystem play, we are obviously building the real estate brokerage. We built India's largest mortgage brokerage, which marries into the real estate brokerage. Over the last 12 months, we have built a very, very strong presence in rentals and property management. We are building real estate SaaS solutions, CRM. We are trying to get into the offshoots of the entire value chain, how it starts from a consumer looking for a real estate option, either for an end user for investment, till the time he probably gets an asset handed over, to how he manages the asset post delivery, everything inclusive in between. So yes, we would have competitors at every leg of the value chain. Like, we'll be competing with 99 and Magic Bricks and housing for the traffic. We would be competing with the likes of PropTiger, Anarock, 360 on the Indian real estate brokerage piece. We will be competing with an Andromeda on the mortgage brokerage piece. We will be competing with No Broker on the rentals piece. There is no large property management platform in India yet. We will be probably the solo large organized player. And we will be competing with the likes of Salesforce on the real estate SaaS piece. So there's no single player apart from us who has holistically tried to combine all the pieces together. Probably in the next 2 to 3 years, we might see one, but not today.
So when you say that, how much of the Indian market share does Square Yards hold currently?
I divide that answer into 2 parts: pre-COVID, post-COVID. My favorite part to the answer first. Post-COVID has been a phenomenal run for us. So over the last 4 months, we have controlled 100 days rather. We have controlled almost 25% market share in India, practically 1 in every 4 transactions. Pre-COVID though, when markets were far more normal, we were still by far the largest, but we were anywhere between 3 to 3.5% market share of Indian real estate.
So that's very interesting. So I wanted to know, now coming to PropTech, what has been your observation with regards to PropTech companies in India and your offering with regards to the edge? How exactly Square Yards is going to benefit out of this offering in the long run?
I'll come on to the edge, to the second part of my answer. I think prop tech is one of the most misunderstood words, not just in Indian ecosystem, but in the global consumer tech ecosystem as well. It's a very different asset class. It's a heterogeneous asset class. So it's very different from an e-commerce, very different from an auto commerce, very different from food delivery, obviously, because those are homogeneous asset classes. Here, the asset we are talking about is potentially anywhere between 40 to 60% of the wallet size of any consumer. Not just that, every asset has an individuality. So every building is different, every floor is different, every view is different, every floor plan is different, and which makes it very, very difficult to get to 100% digital value chain ecosystem, unlike some other asset classes. In fact, we run the mortgage brokerage business as well, and we are one of the staunchest believers that mortgage over the next 2 to 3 years should move 100% digital. There is no need for a human involvement in a mortgage. You don't need to touch and feel a mortgage. But a real estate technology would remain a significant enabler. And never say never. Blockchain coming in over a period of time could become 100% digital, but not for a foreseeable future. Having said that, tech plays a very, very strong role in every single part of the value chain. I think how a real estate transaction is done, probably 7 years back, if 95% was offline, 5% was digital, today that has moved to probably 50 to 60% offline, where there is some offline component involved, and another 40 to 50% digital. I think that will continue to change. Like, for example, what happened in the last 4 months, potential consumers could come onto the portal, not just search for the real estate inventory. They could have the entire 3D walkthrough. They could understand the directions to the particular project. They could payment gateway integration. They could make the payments online. The application forms were integrated, so they could complete the entire process online, apart from the last step, which is a registration of the property, and which is one of the reasons. So we were pretty much the only player in India who were digitally ready, if I were to say in 2 words, and that's one of the reasons why we were able to capture such a large market share. But that will continue to evolve. So you will see over the next 24 months, over the next 34 months, a lot of developers, a lot of market participants, a lot of distributors becoming much more digital ready. But would there be an offline component? Yes. Now, answer to your second question, where does Edge come in? I think Edge kind of facilitates most of it for the people who have not been running most of their platforms on tech. You might be surprised to know most of the developers in India still run their reconciliation on Excel sheets. It might take weeks and months for a clients to tally the payments they have made to a developer. And a lot of it sounds very archaic, but that has been the traditional nature of the real estate industry in India. So Edge is not just a pure play CRM solution, which most of the other real estate SaaS platforms in India are offering. It goes beyond that. Basically, we have been running thousands and thousands of transactions as an intermediary. So effectively, Edge is an encapsulation of all the learnings we have had over the last 4 years, running the largest distribution model in India, how the channel management model works, what do you need to do in the real estate transaction, how do you need to track this, where the reconciliation comes in, how do you keep that entire end-to-end flow of the inventory management to the payment management online. So everything, including the CRM, that's what Edge is. And we believe it competes in terms of the domain knowledge. It competes with one of the best global SaaS players out there. Most of them are in US. And since it is our intention, our endeavor is to continue to improve the product. It's still early days for us. It's only the first quarter we launched this product. So we are not looking at monetizing this product in a large way yet. I think over the next 6 months, the endeavor is to ensure that we make our product perfect. And then at some point early next year, we'll launch it globally in a far more aggressive way.
So I want to know, like, in between during this COVID time, I had few discussion when it comes to CRM solutions. The developers and few PropTech companies said that they face problem to make developers understand how the CRM solution will work. And the hassle what they face from a developer point of view is they don't want to expose that kind of CRM which they already has, because they are quite, in terms of, I would say, data, and also they don't want to reveal those lead generation which is happening, and they get quite strict or mental block is there when it comes to CRM solution, and still PropTech is trying to make developer understand, especially in Indian market. So do you face such problems as well?
100%. So I think there is a lack of belief or a trust. I'm not getting the right word for that. Where developers think everything which could go wrong will go wrong with them. It's Murphy's law for them right now for this space. I think where it helped for us vis-a-vis a lot of other market participants was our expertise in the space. So we went to the developers, we told them, and with real time examples of this is how this technology helped us scale. We scaled from 2 people to 3,000 people, largest distribution workforce in India. And the crux and the back end or the backbone running that scale is Edge, our version of Edge, our captive version of Edge. And once we do that, once we share those success stories with them, that gives a lot of confidence to them. And that's one is moving. But to answer your question is right. So developers are very, very wary of. I think the biggest worry in their mind is data. And so obviously a lot of comfort has to be given to them that whether the servers could be local rather than remote, etc.
So does Edge provide that kind of solution which can be integrated to their CRM, or Edge has to be created separately in a different server? So because why I'm asking this, the maximum what we spoke about data being exposed, this is where their hindrance comes. So does Edge gives that kind of solution where it is integrated to their CRM so that they don't have to feel, okay, my numbers are being exposed, my leads are being exposed?
Exactly. So that's what it happens. So most of the servers are local with developers. And so I think Edge, how do you define Edge? It is a combination of a product platform as a service platform, where as a product, it is still evolving. And there are, so we sit with the larger guys, we try and customize based on their requirement, based on their individual customized solutions which they want. But parallelly at the same time, slowly but surely, we are trying to manifest into a pure SaaS play, because that is the only way to scale after a point in time. I think our thought process is using all this feedback, which our partners are providing us. Eventually, we will make Edge a much better holistic product, which will be able to provide a single source of solution to most of the demands or the wants of most of the developers out there.
Okay. So with the recent acquisition that Square Yards did, it was quite interesting to know. I wanted to understand the acquisition of Azuro. Are you trying to achieve the same objective that NoBroker is trying with their NoBroker Hood platform?
No.
And
so
how is Azuro different? Just to continue, how is Azuro different than NoBroker Hood platform?
I think the biggest difference is where the name is. NoBrokers, I'm not getting into how they are running the business model per se, but their at least verbatim strategy is that Indian consumer does not need a broker for most of the transactional needs. We come with a very, very different thought process. We say the entire transactional complexity is so humongous in India. At every level, you need a broker. The role the broker should play should be very different from a traditional broker used to play. So you need an intermediary to make your life convenient. So why do we need a food delivery? You can go and pick up the food at a restaurant, right? The role a food delivery provider provides is the role a broker provides effectively to make your life convenient, to make your life faster. If you are a potential tenant looking for a house, if you are a potential landlord looking to rent out your house, do you want to be actually involved in ensuring every site inspection happens in front of you? Or do you want an intermediary who could manage everything for you at a reasonable price and get that burden off your chest? So we believe in the latter. And that is exactly what. So I think crux of both businesses are very, very simple. There's a very, very large opportunity in India, especially in the rentals market. It's probably 4x the market size of the sales volume in India, and very, very fragmented play. Small brokers or small distributors run that. How do we organize it? We are organizing it using the intermediaries. They are trying to organize it without using the intermediaries. That's the core difference, and that's where the monetization difference and every other difference would lie.
So what I noticed something interesting under Azuro, there's this tool called Vector. where you provide the real-time accuracy of in what locality, in what society, what rental is going for that particular 2 BHK or 1 BHK. Very few companies have that data, and very few companies are be able to provide that to owners to understand what exactly the market scenario is. So right now, what I've understood, Vector is right now limited to Mumbai and Thane market. So will you be expanding it further in terms of tool improvisation for other cities? Also, will you be collaborating with any other prop tech company which is actually working on that data front?
Answer is plain yes. We believe data analytics will play a very, very critical role over the next 5 years as industry becomes more and more organized. The challenge in India, and again, the opportunity in India, is the data is not transparent. So which helps create significant loops of disruption as an organization if we are able to do that. So a lot of investment going into that, a lot of bandwidth going into that over the next couple of months. Whether greenfield or inorganic, we will see some large initiatives from Square Yards on the data analytics side. But yes, that will be expanded pan-India. That will cover most of the markets in India, and that we believe probably 12 months down the line, we believe is one of the biggest differentiating points between Square Yards and any other platform in the market.
So there's a pattern I noticed with Square Yard Journey. What I'm noticing is the kind of solutions you're providing, there are different solutions coming all together in one umbrella. It's all integrated. Right. So in future, will we be seeing more solutions? Like right now, people are working on immersive technology and building those 3D virtual tours and even providing those drone virtual tours so that consumer can see how it looks from outside due to this COVID situation. Are we looking at Square Yards also getting involved in such solutions sooner?
We did. I don't know if you are aware. So I think we were slightly early than most of the market participants were. So we actually acquired a startup 3 years back on virtual reality and exactly focusing on what you said. We realized, but so just rehashing that, at the core of what we are trying to build is also a business. We believe in monetization. We believe in unit economics. We believe in profitability. We believe in scale, and scale, when I say scale, in terms of market share as well as the numbers. Even today, it's not monetizable. So whether we would love to do it, yes. Whether we would love to integrate that as a solution to our consumers, 100% yes. Whether it is economically viable for an intermediary to do that, no. Whether developers should be doing it, yes. As a fraction of their project cost, it makes sense. For an intermediary, it doesn't make sense. So that's the challenge.
Okay. So I want to know, like during this COVID time, I'm sure you must have noticed certain particular trends. So what we have noticed that young generation, like recently, a lot of co-living startups have got good number of funding, and there's certain data which has come in which show that more of demand of co-living is happening. So do you see there will be a shift more towards the co-living market as comparison to buying homes when we talk about young generation?
I think that was again, I'm correcting myself. So a lot of people are talking about a lot of that shift happening towards shared economy, which is exactly co-living pre-COVID. And a lot of industry experts today speak about that shift has reversed. I neither bought into that. I'm not buying into this. I believe India is such a large enough demographic market that both shared economy as well as end use segment have their own 100x journey left in this market. So and I think the biggest learning for us in COVID, Kritika, has been don't put ourselves into the consumer shoes. Very, very different from what you will hear from most of the startups. They put themselves in consumer shoes, understand the problems, and then build the products. We believe the market is large enough to probably subscribe to most of the good products which get built for the consumers. So I believe I was one of the most risk-taking guys around in my peer set. Even I would not have bought a home during COVID. I would have waited. I would have thought, let prices correct. We don't know how the markets will react. Let's wait for that. We were amazingly positively surprised the kind of demand we got. Means if there is a good potential risk reward, there is enough risk appetite in a certain segment of the consumer. Those consumers may not think like you, may not think like me. But that's the beauty of 1 billion consumers in India. You probably have a demand for every good product. I think all entrepreneurs need to do is invest in the right product, invest in the right distribution. Law of probability will take care of itself.
So post-COVID, what trend you'll be seeing more happening in terms of be residential or commercial space?
Um, I will. I'll give a very contrarian answer to that. And not just me, a lot of my industry colleagues, a lot of my stakeholders, a lot of my colleagues in Square Yards believe industry will shift. I don't think industry will shift yet. I think unless COVID runs for 18 months, yes, there will be significant permanent scars and the industry will evolve. I believe everyone in underestimating humans' ability to forget or inability to take lessons from what happened in the last 6 to 6 months. Would there be houses built with a separate corner for office because work from home has suddenly in favor? I don't think so. Maybe a couple of developers would launch, but I don't think that's a viable option. What if in 6 months everyone's life is normal, everyone is starting to go back to offices? What will happen to those homes? If I am a developer, would I risk building a $500 million project based on the presumption that how will certain set of consumers, a certain category of consumers react? See, every consumer is different. A lot of people are afraid to go out. At the same time, a lot of people, I'm living out of Dubai and everything is open here. We go to gym every day. It's like business as usual, as if COVID never existed. So I think consumers are very funny. We don't know how they will react 6 months down the line. We don't know how they will react 12 to 18 months down the line. It's stupidity to build something with the presumption of what will happen 24 months down the line. By the time developers start building a new product today, it will be finished in 36 months. The world could be very different in 36 months. So very contrarian view. But I come from that school of thought. I don't believe in forecasting consumers' behavior.
I think you're the first one to tell me that, because till now what I've been hearing about trend is 1.5 BHK will come, 2.5 BHK will come. More of satellite office outlets will come because people will now prefer working from home and not traveling that much. Rather stay in the city. They might be like, for example, in Mumbai, people might go and stay in Palava and other outer cities where they can have a big spacious home also. So these kind of trends everyone spoke about. I think you're the first one who said the possibility is lesser in this front, which I agree also, because as you said, once that construction will happen, you never know what the market is at that moment. And maybe the vaccine also comes in the picture. Then what?
Right.
Again, you will have unsold inventories.
Agreed. So whether a developer should build a 1.5 bedroom or a 2 bedroom is a function of supply and demand in that micro market. Like we have always been one of the biggest proponents of, in a market like Mumbai, where the prices are very high, and everyone wants to stay in a good accommodation. No one wants to stay 2 hours away from office. Traveling time is so high. So should developer launch micro homes, effectively studios? Yes, but because the supply and demand in that micro market calls for that. Should developers change the configuration of what they are trying to build based on COVID? I think some people are saying they will. I will be surprised if they actually do.
Okay. So I really want to know this, and I asked all my prop tech entrepreneurs, who has been your role models till now and why?
Many people. I think answer is not one. I believe we have to learn every single day. I'm not mincing my words when I say that. I believe we learn, obviously, when we grew up, we learned from our parents, we learned from our elders, we learned from our teachers, we learned from role models, which everyone consider role models, celebrities, successful people, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos. Yes, everyone wants to learn from them. But I think the biggest learning we have is in daily life, is experiences around us. How do you learn from your colleagues? How do you learn from someone doing something good and you notice someone doing something good? You see someone treating someone nicely, you should learn that instant. This is how I should behave. So I believe in, I have a theory in life that 20% people believe in self-evolution. They go home every single day, they look into the mirror, they ask themselves the tough questions. They want to improve, they want to become a better person the next day. A large chunk of population does not bother. So people who are in the former category, who believe they have to evolve, they have to continue to evolve, I think learn the most. And I at least try that. Every single person, every single experience, every single instance, I try and learn something from that.
That's nice. So also I want to know, in terms of young entrepreneurs who keeps asking us, what would be your advice for them when they're entering in a prop tech domain in India?
I think not just prop tech. First, my answer should be to every young entrepreneur. Don't start for wrong reasons. And I come across multitudes of startups every single week. So so when I used to invest in startups, I haven't invested for a long time. I put all my liquid capital back into Square Yards. I still believe that's the most profitable investment I'll ever make. But I'm just going back 6 years, 7 years. I used to look for two things. One, entrepreneur has to be all in. It doesn't matter whether entrepreneur is investing $10,000 or $100,000 or $1 million. If it cannot be the most profitable investment for that entrepreneur, it cannot be for an investor. You have to believe in what you are trying to build. Even today, when we hire a very senior management hire, we have never given sweat equity in our life, in our evolution. We have never had advisors who we gave sweat equity to. Every single advisory board member had to pay for it. Every single senior management professional had to pay for it. My theory to them is either you believe you can build a 100x business or you cannot. If you build a 100x business, this is going to be the jackpot you will ever invest in. And if you can't believe you can build a 100x business, I don't want you to build that business for me. So that's the one checkbox, very, very dear to me. The second, it has to be a passion. I think an entrepreneur should not, so I know a lot of people say that every failure of a startup is also a lesson, etc. And obviously startups fail, it should not be end of life. But we should fight tooth and nail, give our life and death to ensure we don't fail. Failure should not come easy. We should not be okay with failing. That's what I'm saying. So obviously the world should not crash, unfortunately, if we fail. But we should not get up every single day from our bed thinking that it's okay, even if I fail at the end of the day, I would have learned. So it should be life and death for that entrepreneur. And that is how we build the business. And that is what I'll tell everyone, that don't build it for wrong reasons. Don't think about valuations. Valuations will come. If you build a good, I have not seen even a single good business in the world which has not got valuations it deserves over a period of time. So valuations will always be the byproduct. Don't build it just because you want to do something of your own. It's not easy. I think everyone around us knows that it comes with own set of challenges, and working for someone is much peaceful than working for yourself. But if you really believe in something, if you really want to build a legacy for yourself, if you want to wake up every single day with single-minded passion, and if you can think 24/7 about a certain startup, yes, you should.
That's a great advice. And now I understand why Square Yards is doing so profitable, because of the values you have in place. That's so great to know. Also, one last thing I want to know, because young entrepreneurs feel that whoever we have interacted with, they feel that if that certain company has received funding, they are doing success. But that's not the way to look at, right? Because in India, it's become a new trend per se, and especially when it comes to PropTech also, a certain company has done a huge valuation has happened, huge funding has happened, so they are maybe on the right track. So what advice would you have for those young entrepreneurs who think in those lines?
See, most of the entrepreneurs and startups would have gone through that cycle. I won't say capital is not important. Capital is a good enabler again. Like tech was a good enabler for prop tech. Capital is a very, very strong enabler. But getting a particular capital at a particular valuation is neither a testament to the success, or not getting that is a testament to the failure. I think it should be something like how we treat resources. I want a certain business to build. I want a very good guy to run my business, right? I would probably take hundreds of interviews to find that right guy. If I find that guy, doesn't mean I will build, or that person will build that business seamlessly. Or if I don't find that guy, doesn't mean that I will never build that business again. And I think very, very similar analogy to capital. Capital to an extent is a commodity. If again, umpteenth time I'm repeating message to young entrepreneurs that focus on business. If you build a good business, capital will come. Capital will have to come. You should not be thinking to build a business with a burn. Someone will come and save us from the lifeboat. It's your business, right? Think like a traditional entrepreneur. Think like how our dads would have thought if they would have built a business in their 30s. Would they have ever thought of private equity? No. the way they used to think of our uncles, our aunt, the way they used to think about business is that my business has to make money, my business has to achieve scale. Obviously, scale is a function of aspirations you have. Some people are happy building a small business. Some people want to build a legacy. That's an individual choice, but they would have never been dependent on the external capital. External capital helps, definitely helps, but external capital should not decide the success or fate of what you are trying to build.
I completely agree with that, because a lot of startups who have got the capital also, it's not necessary they are making a revenue. The young entrepreneurs should also focus the kind of business you're doing and what revenue you're making, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So you give $50 million to 5 entrepreneurs in the same industry. How they will use $50 million is entirely different.
Yeah.
So yes, capital raising is important to an extent, but how you will use that capital will determine the success for your business. And if you were in that category who would have used it very, very well, you probably would learn to evolve without capital as well. I think most of the entrepreneurs should think about equity, should think about dilution. They should not. So I see, like, people come to me and say that just being an advisor to us and I'll give you 10% equity. And I get furious on them. Like, do you know what you're talking about? This 10% equity is your life. Why are you even offering someone a 5% or a 2% or a 10% equity for someone's advice? Yes, advice is important, but every single share in your startup should be guarded with your life.
So good you brought that point, because there are few accelerator programs coming already there in India for PropTech companies, and they have certain, of course, they do provide them mentorship, they do provide them the exposure to the Indian real estate industry, but they also take a certain equity in the company. So what do you have to say when it comes to accelerator programs, when this thing happens for the young entrepreneurs who enter there and they have to give those certain 4 or 5% of equity?
So my message to both entrepreneurs as well as advisors is, so I think the message to the advisors is, please don't take advantage of the kids who don't know much about what they are giving out. They don't know the importance of that 5% today. Your value to them, you think maybe worth 5%, but if you honestly ask yourself, helping someone grow should not be worth 1/20th of their entire life's journey. 5% is 1/20th of whatever they will build over a period of time. Because you would want to see an entrepreneur with significant skin in the game once they have grown. And we have seen time and again, once the skin in the game ends, a lot of entrepreneurs tend to treat like a normal job, and that's where the differentiation would come. If an entrepreneur wants to run that for the next 20 years, and I'm not saying they will eventually end up running that for 20 years, but the thought process has to start from the pedestal that I want to run it. I want to build it into a large venture, and I want to run it till the time I can, till the time I have passion, till the time I have energy towards it. For that, they need to continue to control a significant skin in the game. So I think a lot of VCs probably make the same mistake. I think after the first 2 rounds, and I think I'll be surprised if any one of us disagrees that first 2 rounds is still when a lot of ideation is happening. You still don't know, you still haven't perfected the business model, you are still learning, you are still making mistakes, you are still evolving. And during that early phase, after the end of first 2 rounds, we find a lot of entrepreneurs sitting on 10% equity, 5% equity. When I used to invest, I would never invest in an entrepreneur who is willing to dilute so easily. Simple.
So then what do you have for say when it comes to accelerator programs? Because accelerator programs are doing that. I won't say they have their say on that they are helping those entrepreneurs who have already built their business but do not know, for example, how to pitch to investor, right?
So help it for free. Why not? So if you have been there in your life, if you have achieved, tick those boxes, we talk about being good to people, being good to ecosystem. Give that 1 hour for free. What's the problem in that?
Right.
So that's my advice. Now I'll tell you my example. Do I have time to take out to be able to do that? I wish I had. I may not be able to. But if I had time, would I charge for that time? That's where my problem is. if you have time and if you have capacity and if you have resources to help someone without much in return, much of expectation in return.
Right.
What goes around comes around eventually.
That's a great way to look at it. And plus, that's a way I think all PropTech companies also should think and visualize. And equity is very important. I have heard so many in the market that so many programs have come, but in exchange, they have given their certain 5% equity or 6% equity, which completely shocks me. But they say it's normal because they're getting certain help, they're getting exposure to the Indian developers whom they are not able to reach directly from their end. But it's still, as a being a PropTech cheerleader, it still somehow surprises me that Indian market, when it comes to PropTech industry, is still not being mature enough to know and understand these basic things. You being from the bank background is helping you to know more on this front. But there are so many, entrepreneurs who does not see a huge difference when it comes to equity. How does it matter if I'm giving 5% of equity?
Exactly. Agree. And I think the problem lies more with the mentors rather than entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs are young. They haven't seen these markets. They still don't realize the importance of that. They haven't gone through the cycle. But even if you want a token in equity, just take 0.5%, take 1%. 1% of $100 million business is $1 million eventually. But yes, I think that's an ecosystem issue. It will evolve when it evolves. So.
Right. That's so nice that you have come on board for PropTech Story, and we learned so much about Square Yards, and it's great to know, and I'm sure all the entrepreneurs will learn more once this video is out, to know about equity more and how to function when it comes to entering this particular market. Thank you so much, Tanuj, for giving us your time today.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Kritika, for having me.
Thank you.